Good morning, and to our friends joining us abroad, good evening. Thank you for joining Mirage Talks, and welcome back after the long holiday break. It's good to see all your faces. Today we have a very special Mirage Talk, Slam Dunk on Mental Resilience and Performance at Work. We welcome Mimi Winsberg, Stanford-trained psychiatrist, co-founder of Brightside, and former Facebook on-site psychiatrist, along with Eddie Johnson, who was 17 years in the NBA and TV and radio broadcaster, along with Yair Nati, who is also a Mirage alumni, co-founder and CEO of Ai25 AI. Thank you all for joining us. Let's get started.
So Ai25. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Christy. So it's nice to see familiar faces from the Mirage network. So what I'll do is I'll start with a few minutes of intro about Ai25 and about the work that we do, and then we'll give the stage to Mimi and Eddie that. We'll tell you all about them in a second, in addition to what Christy said. And then the goal is to make it a discussion. Like it's a group of CEOs and executives from leadership positions. So we know that you have a lot to say. And the goal is to make it a conversation. So with that, I'll just start. So what the goal of what we do in Ai25 is based on two main motivators. Okay, so the first is we don't like other mind-controlling companies doing it, and we will get back to that in just a second. Like for me, the primary motivator is how to spend every second right. And to make the most out of the very limited amount of time we have on this planet. And that can mean different things for different people. Like, as most of us, I'm a workaholic. So my life's mission is to make an impact. Others want to finish their day at 5 p.m. and do something else, and both options are good. But the point is that we want to help people spend their time the most effective way possible. And looking at things that can help our ability to do that, attention, or if you want, digital pollution is among one of the biggest problems. Now, in this day and age, especially working from home, we see that as a leading cause to poor performance and poor mental health. So sometimes for high achievers in this group, like people don't think it's an issue, but it's a fact. That no one believes that every time that you open a text message, either WhatsApp or iMessage, it takes us 25 minutes to get to be focused again, like in a way that enables us to do deep work. And according to the US Bureau of Labor, effectively employees work 3 hours a day, which is another fact that no one believes. And we've all been there. Like we've opened our phones for just a second, checking an email, spending 45 minutes answering other emails. And that's just one example. Now, that's not a mistake. That's by design. We have other companies using our data to capture our attention. And we see ourselves, Ai25, as the antidote to these mind-controlling companies. Now, what we do, and I will just say it shortly, is both a Chrome extension and the mobile apps that helps all of us in real life, real time, improve our performance and reach a state of flow. And that includes like when we are writing an email, when we are browsing, when we are writing a document. And I'll end up with saying the following. Like, this is a short session. We have more exciting speakers than me that are going to speak very soon. we see that as something that is connected to real life KPIs, like this digital pollution that affects mental health and productivity. It affects stress and it affects burnout in companies. And these are things that we all should care about. And so with that, I will say that we have two amazing experts that are going to follow up now. And the first one is Mimi Weinsberg, a Stanford-trained psychiatrist, the former on-site psychiatrist for Facebook, and chief medical officer of Brightside, and really also an amazing person. So Mimi, would you like to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. As Yair mentioned, I am a psychiatrist and advise Ai25 AI. And I thought we could talk a bit today about mental health in the workplace, resilience in the workplace, and the offshoot of that, which is how work has been transformed, particularly post-pandemic, and what some of the implications are for mental health and performance. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and we can presentation mode. So again, is asynchronous communication the future of work? There's a statistic that's put forth by the Harvard Business Review that 70% of all digital transformations fail. And one of the things we saw as work, remote work became adopted in a widespread way during the pandemic, is that we just took what we were doing in person and put it online. And, I talk about this all the time in telemedicine, that good telemedicine is not just putting a doctor and a patient behind a screen. You really have to think about the technology that you're going to apply. And what happened as we've just put people behind screens is that we're seeing workplace stress increase and engagement decrease. So engagement was at an all-time low. Work engagement was at an all-time low in the last couple of years. And more Americans are claiming to suffer from workplace stress. So this is not a good outcome. Another statistic that's interesting is that 80% of time is spent in synchronous communication. And what I mean by synchronous communication is either meeting time over Zoom or in person, or as Yair was mentioning, kind of rapid fire responses to intrusive messages that kind of hijack your day or deep thought. And it turns out that this probably is not great for either our mental health or our performance at work. So meeting burnout, back-to-back Zoom meetings in particular is certainly leading to a certain level of burnout. And another statistic that a study out of Harvard Business School showed that 71% of senior executives are saying that meetings are unproductive and inefficient. So what are some of the alternatives, and how can we reimagine how work might be done? We certainly need to rely on real-time meetings for very collaborative work, but what this can lead to is a busy calendar, a lot of Zoom fatigue, long hours across time zones as we're working with a distributed workforce now, and a lack of flexibility in schedule, particularly with regard to individual needs. So, individuals vary. Some of us do our good work in the morning, some do our good work in the evening. I think we each have some intuitive sense about when we're most productive, but a typical meeting work schedule doesn't take that into account. Whereas a move towards asynchronous communication, and what I mean by that is of course, some messaging, but also shared apps, document, task boards, a lot of technical tools that can exist and plugins to block messaging when it's appropriate. These can all lead to greater flexibility, better time management, potentially better efficiency and thoughtfulness. And with that, I think performance, mental health, and everything we've been talking about. It doesn't mean that it's not collaborative. It's just collaborative and independent when it's done this way. Atomic Habits is a very popular book that probably many of you have glanced at, but there's a quote that James Clear says, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And I think that thinking about the systems that we're using in remote work this is the time and the place to do it. So does flexibility lead to productivity? And I think this is something we could have a longer discussion about, but most people feel that spending a lot of time answering emails, having meeting overload, as we've discussed, and getting constant status updates will all get in the way of accomplishing their goals, and that high cognitive efforts aren't being emphasized with these tools, or longer bouts of focus either. So a lot of people become preoccupied with looking busy, and at the same time are getting less done. I am not able to advance for some reason here. Let me just see here. Okay, here we go. So tools to help productivity in remote work. This really comes back to an emphasis on quality rather than time spent. I mean, actually, efficiency is maybe the greatest reward here, but what particularly tools can do is optimize for the particular individual's needs and productivity rather than set hours. So things like using office hours to block off specific time for meetings rather than deep work. And as I said, using plugins to escape from a constant influx of message or distractions from social media or other apps that may be hijacking our attention. Deep work, we define as, Cal Newport is the professor who coined this term, but the definition is really the ability to focus on cognitively demanding tasks for prolonged periods with no distraction. And this has become an increasingly scarce resource in, I think, all of our lives. There's not time for reading, there's not time for deep thinking, and there's not time for focused work, which will take, as Yair pointed out, time to get into and time to get out of. So interruptions really are quite costly for employees across all levels. When we look at asynchronous communication and what the benefits and pitfalls are for this, obviously asynchronous communication potentially makes more time for deep work and a thoughtful response to inbound requests or messages. It also can create more of a seamless experience across time zones. So those who are, awake at certain hours can work during their optimal hours. But I think one thing that's often neglected is this notion of who performs better in synchronous meetings. And not surprisingly, men and extroverts tend to be more vocal in meetings. And what asynchronous communication can do is give more of a voice to introverts, more of a voice to women and minorities, and thus create more diversity in ideas and expression rather than what will typically happen in a synchronous meeting. Another, I think, important aspect of asynchronous communication is that it's written and discoverable. This is, of course, an advantage and a disadvantage depending on how you look at it. You do have a written record of what was discussed. Sometimes that can also get you into trouble. But a clear pitfall is that it lacks facial expression, tone, body language, and is thus potentially create challenges of interpretation. And it's also reactive if you're not careful. So you have to be careful not to drop everything to respond to non-urgent notifications, and have some kind of triage system around those asynchronous communications. So I wrote a book during the pandemic. That was how I made use of my free time when there was nothing else to do. And the book is called Speaking in Thumbs, and it's actually about the role that asynchronous messaging plays in our romantic lives. Not surprisingly, many of our romantic lives, from meeting strangers on dating apps to even communication among spouses, has moved to text messaging. And while texting is a relatively new language, something we've really only been doing since 2007, it's now become the predominant way in which we communicate in romance. And I argue that it's actually a new language, and one that we need to be fluent in, because our text messages actually can reveal important things about ourselves. you can tell if somebody's depressed or suicidal from their text message. We use this kind of technology at Brightside and in other behavioral health endeavors that I've taken on. But we can also see what somebody's personality type might be. So what are their big 5 personality traits, attachment styles? And if we look at a text message exchange between 2 people, we can actually see the nature of that relationship. So is there trust in the relationship? What are the power dynamics? These things are revealed through language structure, even things like pronoun usage. And I'll talk just a bit more about that in the workplace. So I argue in the book that these text threads are actually the electronic medical record of our relationships, and that by becoming fluent in this language, you can actually have a better understanding of what kind of communication is taking place and who the people you are communicating with really are. So how does this play out in the workplace? Well, not surprisingly, many of us are spending a good chunk of our day on Slack now, and messages and even emojis have kind of moved sort of front and center in our workplace communications. As I said, there are certain power dynamics that can become visible in exchanges like that. So just as an example, executives or upper managers will tend to avoid the first person pronoun I and instead focus on the we or the us and our. And subordinates instead will reflect more on the me and the I and the mine. And so you can see power dynamics in a text exchange if you look carefully. Emojis are interesting in that, they used to be really a social thing, but and most people, I think younger people in particular, feel that a social message without an emoji is somehow naked, or not able to, you can't see the nuance of the message without the emoji. But a large majority, or almost a majority of people are using it at work now. 53 report using emojis at work. Although few people are reluctant to use it with a boss, but it's particularly used to express empathy in messages, and so it can add nuanced feelings to sensitive conversations that you may be having at work or just give encouragement. Setting is important, and we even see cultural differences in emojis. So just as an example, the smiley face emoji is mostly used positively, but people will also use it to express exacerbation in a message. That exacerbation percentage is highest in the US and lowest in Japan and Korea. So setting is important, and I think being culturally sensitive and sensitive to the setting in which you're exchanging messages can help interpret those messages. But I think the general consensus is that emojis are adding nuance and speeding communication and can add to the speed of quick messages at the workplace. So I'll just conclude by saying that I think that communication and asynchronous communication in particular has become increasingly important in terms of productivity and a sense of well-being in the workplace, and that we need to think about which tools we should apply when in terms of emphasizing productivity and mental health. So obviously, there are certain scenes like brainstorming and dealing with unknowns and relationship building, and of course, crisis management, where synchronous communication is going to be extremely necessary. But asynchronous tools may have an increasingly important role, and we need to think about how to emphasize communication in that format, set norms around it, and find ways to bridge gaps in misunderstanding. So I'll pause there, and we can, I can answer any questions, or we can just save the discussion for later in the meeting.
Yes, and Eddie might need to leave us a few minutes before time, yeah, because he needs to go to his show. So the goal is for Eddie to speak, and then we'll make it a discussion. But thanks, Minnie. That's interesting as always. So any of you that's an NBA fan but even if you're not, is going to be excited by listening to Eddie Johnson. I think that scored more points than Scottie Pippen. Is that right, Eddie? Today he has a daily radio show and is a color analyst for the Phoenix Suns. 17 years in the NBA, knows something about mental resilience, and is going to talk about how it relates to our non-athletic life. Eddie, you're muted.
Eddie, you're muted.
Yeah, Eddie is still muted.
All right, now I'm here.
Perfect.
It's a lot better than watching my mouth move. But Mimi, always great hearing how you break things down. It makes so much sense to me. And thank you all for giving me an opportunity. Ai25.ai is something dear to my heart. When I met Amir and Yair months ago, it jumped out at me. It was simply amazing because it actually tied up everything that I've experienced in my life. And quickly, just growing up in the inner city of Chicago, and if any of you all been to Chicago, if you've heard about Chicago, it's a beautiful city. But when you grow up in the inner city, it's very difficult. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be sitting here talking to you all, to be able to share my story and just give you some advice on what I've learned and what I've experienced. And when I first heard about Ai25.ai and they broke it down to me, it was simply amazing because in my life, I had Ai25.ai. That's the reason I survived, was because I had it. Case in point, my mom was my Ai25 early on. She limited me in going outside. She had limited me in being able to do things. Matter of fact, acting right in school. I remember one time in school, I was acting up. I didn't know my mom snuck in the classroom. And back then, you can get disciplined, unlike you can now. The next thing I knew was I felt a hand go right across my face. Be quiet, Eddie. And you know what? I spent the rest of my school life, anytime I acted up, I would look behind me because I thought my mom would be there. But she was great for me. She kept me under control. She kept me right. And when I was able to venture out and I went to high school, I met a guy named Frank Lolino. He was an Italian basketball coach. And he told me once I got to the school, because I wanted to play basketball, he said, Eddie, you're not going to see daylight. And I was like, what? He said, you're not going to see daylight. He said, we're going to practice at 7 in the morning. You're going to go to school. We're going to practice at 3 o'clock. And by the time you get home, it's going to be dark. The only thing you're going to have time for is to do your homework. That was it. I got a chance to squeeze in the Happy Days show, if any of you are familiar with that show back in the day. I was able to watch that before I went to bed. But other than that, that's all I did throughout my school year. I had really no relationships. I went to one dance in high school. My focus was on being a basketball player and putting myself in position to get good grades to be able to get a scholarship to a university. That was it. That was the plan he laid out for me. If I didn't have that, no telling what I would have succumbed to. I mean, with the peer pressure in my neighborhood, from gangs, from drug dealers, it was no telling what could have happened to me if it wasn't for Frank Lolino. And when I went to college, my coach Lou Henson told me as an All-American, he said, Eddie, he said, you're not that good yet. Even though I was the #1 player coming out of the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, he said, you're not that good yet. I got to make you better. So I'm going to put you on the bench and you're going to learn how to play the game. He reset me. It took a lot for me to show resilience to him and then focus when I could have just left. I could have went to another school, but he showed me the way. And when I made the NBA, I encountered a guy in Cotton Fitzsimmons who took the father figure role from me. My dad left me at 13 years old. So I didn't have a father figure. And so I had to rely on older gentlemen. I had to rely on coaches to kind of lead me the way. And they became the controller of my focus and resilience, Ai25.ai. And so when he took hold of me, not only did Cotton Fitzsimmons teach me how to play the game at a high level, he got to know me, he got to know my family. He was able to scream at me, he was able to push me, and I allowed him to do it because he gave me balance. And my sisters and brothers, they were the trophies for me. They were the ones that I looked at make mistakes, do the wrong thing, go through tough situations. And I was able to look at that and watch them and not repeat what they did. And so, yeah, I played 17 years in the NBA, but the reason I did was because I had the focus and resilience. A lot of young kids don't have that now. A lot of people in general just don't have it. They don't have the ability to really, I believe, balance themselves because it's very difficult. I had no choice. See, it was a carrot in front of me. I wanted a scholarship, so I had to do what they told me to do. And when I got to the league, if I didn't do what they told me to do, guess what? Eddie wasn't going to get paid. And so I knew they forced me, but then I accepted it. And I thought that was huge because, you know, when you talk about mental health and you talk about different things, you know, you as a CEO, you as an owner, you have a great responsibility. I work for the Phoenix Suns, okay? And if any of you all are familiar what's going on with the Phoenix Suns, I encourage you to Google it. Our owner just lost his team. Name is Robert Sarver. Just lost his team. He has to sell the team, you know, and it's unfortunate. But he had a lot of missteps. He truly did. You know, he forgot hierarchy. You know, when he hired a general manager, when he hired a coach, and he hired, you know, he forgot that he would not allow them to do their job. And in not allowing them to do their job, it was a disconnect. And it wasn't a great flow. And eventually that bad flow gets to your players. And when that happens, they have failure. And so for me, it's all about connect. As Mimi said, it's all about communication. It's all about having that pipeline of, you know, allowing people and give them responsibility to do what they're expected to do. And for me, that was very impactful for me. Just seeing it and seeing what our organization went through and the tough times that we had. It was dysfunction at its finest. And, you know, I go around the country and I talk to different entities and all of that. And I always continue to tell leaders that it's no perfection. The word perfect is a lie. And until you understand that, then you can accept an app like Ai25.ai to help you. You can accept the fact and trust in somebody to where you can go on vacation and know that they're going to do the right thing, that they're still going to carry forth what you want them to do. It's a lot of mistrust. And that mistrust is added on to by all the entities that's out there, right? And in sports in general, it's social networking. I'm going to tell you, it's really bad. And I know it's going on in obviously the workforce as well. Social networking is controlling a lot of people. It really is. And it's controlling them in a negative way. And I have to go on Twitter for my job, but the people that I encounter on Twitter, these are some mean people. I mean, these are some people that love to get your attention in such maybe a negative way. And I'm around players all the time. I mentor a lot of professional athletes. And the number one problem they have is the distractions that come about around their work. And they just don't know how to balance it at all. And they're not getting a ton of help from the people upstairs to really put them in an environment to help them, to give them education, to continue to push them forward. And then what happens, depression sets in. Because now you have people commenting on your work. You have people that you don't even know critiquing what you do and putting blame on you. And then the only thing you have left is to lash out and not balance yourself and be able to just get through it. So social networking has really been a major issue, I believe, in what we encounter every day. And as CEOs and owners, everyone needs your help. They truly do. They need to be guided. They need to have opportunity to be able to balance it because everybody's already on a ledge. I mean, either you're going to pull them back in or you're going to push them because the stress of being successful to having success is not an easy thing. I think we all understand that and we all experience that. And what I always encourage as I wind down here, what I always encourage people to do is to stare and figure people out. The best advice I ever got was from a guy that went to Stanford And he played on the team with me. And he always used to watch people all the time. And we used to always wonder, what's up with Rich Kelly? And I finally sat next to him one day and I said, Rich, why are you always staring at people? You know, he said, how am I supposed to understand how you are as a person if I don't see you and acknowledge you and really break you down when I'm not talking to you? You know, when I'm asking you, when I do talk to you about your family, about how your kids, just digging a little bit deeper instead of just being a robot that works for you. What about getting to know them? And when he told me that, it was impactful for me. And to that day, after that, I became a better leader with my teammates, with my company. I treat people equally, like I would want to be treated. And I found out when that happens, they're more energetic, they're more productive. And then they want to help you because they sense that you like them. They sense that they have a connection with you, i.e. me not having a dad when I grew up and was reaching for father figures. And them in my life helped me. They were my Ai25.ai. They truly were. They got me back on track when I got off track. They helped me just elevate myself. And I found out that I was showing progress because I was committing more to myself than something out there that was making money off me being intertwined in what they were doing. So here I am. I'm sitting here today and I'm so blessed because I'm able to talk to tremendous people all the time. And I'm telling you, not one day in my life when I was young that I thought I'd be at this point. I didn't. I didn't never think I would talk for a living. I never thought that I could motivate and energize people. But it just goes to show you that if you do all the necessary things, you'll get to that point. And so thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk to you and just kind of quickly give you my story because I am a success story. And that's what we want with Ai25.ai. We want to create success stories to give people an opportunity to focus their lives and do the great things that they would love to do.
Well, thanks, Eddie. Thank you so much. We have both also Amir joining us. So everyone, please feel free to send either in the chat or just open your video and you can just ask directly. But in the meantime, Amir, would you like to ask about a few questions, both Mimi and Eddie?
Eddie, do you still have some time before your broadcast?
Oh yeah, I have some time.
Okay, great. So maybe I'll start with you because I know your time is short now. Can you give a concrete example? I know you didn't have any digital solutions like the one we provide to protect, but can you give an example of a situation, a very stressful situation, and what were the means you have used to get out of it in your professional career? Did you hear me, Eddie?
Yeah, I think she might be frozen, I think.
Eddie, the question was for you.
Oh, it was for me?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I thought you mentioned Mimi. I'm sorry. I blocked out.
No. We know you're short, so I've started with the question to you, but we will have plenty of questions for Mimi. So I'll repeat the question. Can you give a concrete example where you're fighting stress? It's a different situation, no digital. And what were the means, what did you do in order to handle it?
Okay, yeah, well, there's a few times I fall stress in regards to doing what I do. And I'll just relate it to sports in general. You know, I was a guy that I had to win. I was very disappointed when I didn't. I love to be patted on the back. I love to be rewarded, but I would put forth the effort to actually put myself in that position. And I can just recount a number of times. Well, the major time for me, I had just got traded from the Seattle Supersonics to the Charlotte Hornets. And I was disappointed that I got traded, but I was optimistic, as I always had been, going to a new environment, and having an opportunity to prove myself despite the odds that might have been against me. And for the first time in my life, I encountered an individual who's a GM. His name was Alan Bristow of the Charlotte Hornets. He was not going to give me a chance, no matter what I did. In practice, I was destroying him. Okay, I was just dominating in practice. The minutes that he played me in a game, I was playing extremely well, but yet I could not win him over. It did not matter. He was not going to play me as much as I would have liked, and he was determined not to do it. And it bothered me because he wasn't being fair, and he wasn't like giving me my due in regards to the work that I was putting forward. And it put me in a place where I'll never want to be again. It took me to a deep depression because for the first time in my life, somebody was like holding me back when I knew that I was excelling. And I couldn't do anything about it.
Holding you back, meaning you weren't on the field. You were not productive, right? You couldn't express yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and really my antidote, I left the NBA for a year. That was my antidote. I knew that I had to reset myself. And I left. I went and played in Greece for a year. And when I went to Greece, it was like God knew where to send me because they treated me so well, it eliminated the negative thoughts that I had from my experiences with my prior team. Like, I mean, they really respected me for who I was. I love basketball again. And I was able to be accepted for the work that I put on the court and not for some little underlying reason to not do it. And it reset me. And then when I came back to the NBA, I was in a better place. And we see that every day in the workforce. I mean, some people leave their job. Some people need a long vacation. Some people need to get away. Are you a CEO that will notice that, but know that person is valuable to maybe give them that opportunity just to keep them on board? Well, they didn't. They allowed me to leave. And that was a disappointing part.
So taking a step back put you back on the field.
Say it again now.
Taking a step back has placed you back in the field.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. It allowed me to reset. And I think everybody needs a reset. It made me to see things differently and to shake a depressive state that I was immersed in. Yes, without a doubt.
Perfect. Thank you. Mimi?
I think,
Yeah,
well, I think
please.
it brings up a point that extends beyond sport. You know, I'm an athlete, but not a skill athlete like you, Eddie. My athletic ability.
So
is
just for the record, you've just
Yeah.
finished your which triathlon?
10th Hawaii
Ah,
Ironman.
and you're not
But-
an
But
okay.
it's all mental. It's not physical. But what I was going to say is, I think it brings up an important point of like the right kind of challenge for people. You know, that you want to try to close the gap and make. Everybody needs a challenge to feel meaning in their life and to feel satisfaction, right? I think we can't feel that sense of satisfaction without having challenge in our life. But it has to be that Goldilocks level of challenge, not too hard where it's completely unattainable, and not too easy either, because the too hard leads to stress, the too easy leads to boredom. And so it's finding that sweet spot, closing the gap for people where you can provide them with the right level of challenge where they can have this experience of success and then satisfaction. Or even
And to
moderate
make-
success, like some amount of failure is okay, but you know what you're striving for is satisfaction. And I think that's a principle that like I've experienced in sport, but very much translates to work.
Mhm.
Can you exactly make it even more specific to an era where we are totally surrounded by digital and we are playing
Sure.
between boredom and stress, and digital is
Yeah.
all over?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the optimal state of work, and I think most of us are familiar with this concept of the state of flow. And flow is where is where demands meet up with skill. So the challenge that you're being presented with effectively correlates at some level with your level of skill. It might be low challenge, low skill, high challenge, high skill. But you know, my skills are going to be different than somebody else's skills. I may have certain situation where I have low skill and I need a low challenge, and certain situations where I have high skill and need a high challenge. But that state of flow is where our brains start really humming and feeling good. And what technology can do is it can, you know, give us a sense of relaxation, like when we're scrolling through social media, you can get a feeling, oh, I'm kind of calming myself down right now. But it's like can be like trying to get nutrition from junk food. You know, it does feel like you're feeding hunger at first, but it ultimately may not be that nutritious. And then I think technology can conversely give us the sense of feeling very stressed when there's a lot of inbound coming. But none of that inbound is particularly acute, you know, and our brain isn't really effectively triaging what is actually life-threatening from what is, you know, something that could be answered 6 hours from now and doesn't really need our attention right away. And so I think the technology can lull us into a sense of, we think we're soothing ourselves with it, but we're actually not. And I think it also can give us the feeling of being very stressed when that stress may not be necessary.
Amazing. Itamar, you wanted to?
Yes. First of all, thank you for this webinar. It's very exciting, and Yair and Amir, thank you for making it happen. And Mimi and Eddie, it sounds very interesting. And I have a question to Mimi. I used to be a startup CEO, and now I'm in a management position. And I'm wondering how can better communication methods can improve my employees' mental health. We'll be glad to learn more.
Yeah, setting examples for communication in the workplace, or your own communication. I'm not sure I understood.
In general, both.
Yeah, well, you know, I think this is not new, is that things trickle down from leadership, right? So the way the leaders behave in an organization is going to trickle down to the way everybody treats others in the organization. So I think you start with what your company values are. And you know, if one of the company values is transparency, we get to speak our mind, arguments are okay, we welcome discord, that is going to be how we get to the best solutions. Well, you know, state that, model that, and model that in communications. Encourage people to challenge you, encourage people to disagree with you. For instance, you know, that might be one tack you could take. I think that might not be every company's value. And you know, other companies might emphasize cordiality or, you know, gratitude. And those would be things that you would emphasize in communications as being sure to thank and give kudos to anyone who's helped you with a project and set up a system of employees giving each other kudos, and you know, and that could be another kind of company principle that you want to, or company value that you kind of want to model your communications around. So I think it's different from one company to another, but you start with what the company values are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just remind everybody if you want to raise a question. Eddie, I think I a little bit know even that mainly where you were like senior in the teams in the last years, the issue of communication and the issue of collaboration that's behind the scenes was very prominent in what you were doing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and
you know.
Can you say something about that, about the inner team and the external, I would say, communications that is happening, and of course in the NBA it's all over, media, fans, etc.
Yeah, so you're saying in regards to what the communication amongst the team, and then with media?
Yeah, more in the bubble against in the world, and what's going on with regard to collaboration and I would say, messages that are going all over, inbound, as Mimi called them, and trying to create a correlation?
Kind of go through that again. I want to make sure I hit it correctly.
Yeah,
Here.
so I'll ask it more shortly. When you are looking at a team that needs to go, you know, in the field and do something very concrete at a specific time, okay?
Right.
How do you, and what are your, I would say, recommendation with regard to how close the communication should be, or how open it should be? How should you be open to what's going on outside compared to being close to yourself, to your teammates, etc.?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, team is team, and then what leaves the locker room generally it does not. It stays in. I know for me as a leader, I was always encouraging guys to really keep things in the locker room, like amongst us. And then if something happens outside of it, we would rally around that particular guy. I just think, you know, the word team is there for a reason. Case in point, Draymond Green punched his teammate 2 weeks ago for the Golden State Warriors. It happened to get out. And the Golden State Warriors did an excellent job of pulling it back in. They did not allow the outside forces to take hold of it and run with it.
Because what? But why? Why was that the advice? What's the reason? What's the logic behind it?
Well, one, it's a promise they made to one another that they was going to keep it in-house as a team. It was a pledge that they made to one another. Sort of like anything, right? Sort of like marriage, sort of like friendship. You make a pledge and you try to keep it indoors. You don't spill your guts out and tell people what's going on within your life. And on a team is very important because that can destroy the fabric of a team. It truly can. Like if something gets out that another teammate said about another teammate, it can totally destroy the fabric of that team and actually cost, obviously, that organization money, cost that team an opportunity to win. It could maybe force the players to want to leave. I mean, it's just that sensitive that it can happen. And I've seen it happen. I've seen guys want out because they didn't get along with their teammates. I've seen coaches want to leave because the owner was just too hardcore on them, didn't allow him to do his job. I've seen GMs want to leave because the owner was too difficult or they weren't allowing him to do his job and get the players that he would want. It's just a level of trust within that organization that, to me, led you to winning. And the great Michael Jordan used to say something that I totally disagreed with, you know, in regards to his general manager, Jerry Krause. Jerry Krause said publicly that organizations win championships. And Michael Jordan came back and said, no, players win. And I disagree. I disagreed with Michael. No, organizations do. Because if your organization is connected with you, they're putting the right players around you, Michael Jordan, to be able to excel and win championships. They did that. The workers that clean up the court to make sure you don't slip and tear your knee up. The training staff that keeps you healthy. All of those things are intertwined. And so communication is extremely important in how you go about your business.
So mitigating communication, in fact, it's better for productivity, not maximizing communication.
Right, yes.
Mimi, I think we have a question for you. Did you see it or should I read it?
No, I did see it. I mean, it's I can read it. It's about
Really?
what are practical ways to create a deep work environment. And I mean, I think it has multiple possible approaches, but I'd say the first requirement is, of course, having the time and space for that, and particularly time for it. So some organizations choose to have a meeting-free day when you have one day where you can count on the fact that nobody will book your calendar. But what that doesn't take into account is something I mentioned when I was presenting, which is that people aren't likely to be able to do deep work for an entire day. It's something that typically you want more like a 4-hour block for, and that individuals are going to vary when they're most productive. For some people, that might be morning hours. For others, it might be evening hours. Some might need to get out and exercise or do some kind of mindfulness exercise or get out in nature in order to sustain that. So you really want to think, ideally, I think it's not just a one day of no meetings. It's letting at least the kinds of employees that you do expect deep work from being able to have some flexibility in their schedule in order to block off time when they won't have meetings scheduled for them. And with that, I think to also give them permission to not reply to anything but urgent messages during that time. And so it's partly about scheduling, and it's partly about having the right technical systems in place. This is where I think we are still learning about the remote work environment and what are the best technical tools for this. I really think it does come down to having the right collaboration tools and the right plugins, like I said, to be able to triage and filter inbounds.
That's clear. I think we are getting towards the end of the session. Yeah, you want to ask like a final
yeah,
question?
so maybe we'll ask both of you the same question. Like we have executives, like CEOs of companies and managers in bigger companies. What is the biggest, most important thing they can do tomorrow morning to improve their employees' emotional resilience? Like one practical thing that they can do tomorrow morning. Same question to both of you. We'll end with that.
You want me to address that one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think resilience is going to come from a number of underpinnings, but I think the first step is engagement, because I think that if you have engagement, if people are feeling engaged with their work, they will find ways to cope around it. I think it's when you have disengagement that you see less resilience and more emphasis on the negative factors that can potentially creep into any workplace. So I would say this is about creating the right place and sense of purpose for employees, and then also enabling people to communicate around that sense of purpose adequately, so that they feel a sense of team, they feel a sense of purpose, and they have the right technical tools in order to be able to maintain those. And that's what I would focus on, is engagement, which is going to be about people, place, and purpose.
Thanks, Mimi. Eddie, same question. Most important tip executives can do tomorrow morning to improve employees' emotional resilience?
I think obviously communication is extremely important, and not being intimidated or intimidating to people that are actually below you. I know a lot of players that I have dealt with. They were extremely intimidated by ownership, by general managers, and sometimes by coaches. And I used to always caution coaches that I played for is that the best form of getting the best out of anybody is communication, not just telling them to go do something, but just having a conversation with them about doing it. I think that gives them some self-worth, sense of belonging, and not that you're controlling them. And I think they want to fight for you. Like, the best owners, the best bosses I've ever been around are the ones that like made me, in a sense, fall in love with them. Like, they got the best interest in me. And then I'd run through a wall. It's the ones that felt like they were controlling me, and it was this, if you don't do it right, you're in trouble. Those are the ones you get intimidated by, and you might fail because you're nervous, you're uneasy. Communication to me is the best. I just felt like in any environment I've been in, it's just having an understanding of what you want me to do, how you want me to do it. And if I don't understand it the first time, please repeat it, walk me through it, and then I'll just go to the wall for you. I think that's always been important to me.
Thank you so much again, Mimi and Eddie. Christy, do you want to close it up?
Yes, well, thank you so much. On behalf of Paul Mirage and the Mirage Institute, we highly appreciate everyone joining us today, and a special thanks to Amir, Yair, Eddie, and Mimi for taking the time to enlighten our Mirage tribe. Thank you so much. See you guys all next week.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.